My name is Katie Jacobs. I'm the editor of HR Magazine, which is the UK's leading magazine for senior HR professionals. Sales pitch, if anybody doesn't currently get it, you can come and speak to me later because it is free for HR budget holders. And we're here to discuss where HR can truly add value now, right now. It's a really exciting time for the HR profession. I think we're at a little bit of a tipping point because I think there is recognition from other business areas and leaders outside of HR that the people side of businesses and the governance of people can make or break an organisation. And I think that's an opportunity that HR really needs to seize rather than lose, because there are lots of other functions and people on the outside of it which could kind of step in and take that. I've got a great panel of former, or I think I said in the original email, recovering HR directors who've gone in to do other things with me today. Starting from this side, I'm going to introduce everyone so they don't take 5 minutes telling you their entire CVs. Too hard.
Didn't take that long.
Yeah. Simon Habden, who is director.
Haben,
sorry. See, that's why other people should do it. Director of Operational Excellence at Royal Mail, and he was formerly leading HR in various roles there. Got Tim Pointer, who is former Global HR Director of Pentland Brands, which is one of the UK's largest privately owned companies. He's now running a company called Starboard. Got Susannah Clements, who is MD of Ithaca Partners HR, which is executive search, and she's former group HR director at loads of companies, including Carillion and Anglican Water. And then, last but not least, got John Evans, who is CEO of the National College for High Speed Rail, formerly group HR director at FirstGroupk. So first thing I wanted to do with the panel was just to whiz round quite quickly, and they should have all thought about this in advance, and ask what is the one most effective way for HR to truly add value now? And Simon, I'll start with you.
So yeah, we did get a bit of advance warning of this, so I thought about it for a few hours and couldn't come up with very much, but I eventually ended up with a metaphor that I thought we'd go with, which was, I think it should be about walking the wire and staying out of the ring. And what I mean by that is, often you can find yourself in the midst of things, and that's what I mean by in the ring. And actually, I think a real role for HR is to be above that. And the wire is symbolic of the tension, and there's lots of tensions. The wire always has a tension itself, and of course, if you're walking along a wire, you're balancing lots of things at the same time, and that's what you're trying to do. And if you're really clever, you'll be juggling loads of things and eating fire as well. But that's kind of perhaps taking the metaphor to the next extreme. But I really think actually it's about walking the wire, rising above things, and staying out of the ring wherever possible.
Tim?
So I heard the metaphor in advance and had to think of one myself. Mine was start at the end, by which I mean we've got to be really clear what it is we're building. So, and deeply, what is that vision of the future? So what's it going to require from us? How are we going to behave? What are the metrics? Quite often we sort of look at the vision can be incredibly beautifully written, and the strategies underneath it can be fairly clear. But really, how are we going to know we've arrived there? What are the measures? And we need to articulate that back. So to be say it's a 2020 vision. Does anyone not have a 2020 vision at the moment? They seem very now. So if you're focused on that date, exactly how are you going to know that you've arrived there? Because it's so much more meaningful for all of us if you can articulate it back. How should we be behaving today in order to get there? So, for example, if gender mix is part of your vision of the business for 2020, what are you doing about it today? Because it ain't going to sort itself out on its own.
Yeah. Susannah, I know you cheated and you got 3 things, but I will let you do it if it's quick.
Okay, I'll try to do it quickly because I said I couldn't just think of one. So I came up with 3, and my 3 are stop thinking of ourselves as a support function and start thinking of ourselves as an enabling function, because that if you're supporting an organisation, you're not in it, and actually what we need to be is in it and doing things which enable the organisation to be successful, not just sort of sit around saying how supportive we're being. The second thing is to get over ourselves. I hear loads and loads of people arguing about, is it OD, is it learning development, and is learning development in HR? Our customers don't care. They really, really don't care. This is about people and how we manage people in organisations, and so I think we should stop worrying about any of that and say, what difference are we making to people in organisations? And the last thing is about get rid of digital stuff. It's just another load of jargon from another team who are called IT, and actually it's not rocket science, and it's the way of the future. So get digital, understand the impact of it, understand social media, because that is where we're all going. So there you go, those are my three, and I was quick.
That was good, very quick. John?
Yeah, I guess I'm a combination of all three of those, and it's about doing today what's going to shape and deliver the future that you want and your clients want. So I'd endorse everything that everybody said. It is about thinking about that digital piece. What does that mean for the workforce? Just been talking to a former colleague who runs a large part of a digital agency, and he's saying now that for his clients now, people is becoming the most critical issue. It's number one in the survey of 1,000 people. So I think there's a real role to be played there from the HR function, whatever it's called, although don't do what Scottish Power call it and call it the people. But I think, think about where you want to be and then do the stuff that's going to get you there. It's as simple as that.
You're all engaging with this topic as escaped HR directors who've gone on to do other things. Has your view of HR changed since you've left? And if so, how? Who wants to kick off with that?
Can I?
Yeah.
So after I came out of the line, I went to work for the CIPD for about 18 months, and I got quite depressed about the HR function because because what I saw was lots of people clinging to the CIPD for validation. I'd go along to lots and lots of talks and conferences, and people would really want to know that the CIPD was going to fix it for them and it was all going to be fine and they could do qualifications and people would take them seriously. That's not how it works. And now I work as a headhunter, and I'm now completely different because I see really amazing HR people who are doing fantastic things and come in full of confidence. So for me, some of it is about people take you at your own valuation, and if you think you're doing a fantastic job and an organisation needs you and HR is really important, astonishingly, organisations believe you. Whereas if you go in, this is my point about a support function, thinking of yourself as a second-class citizen, that is how you're going to get treated. So yes, it has changed. I mean, part of my luck was it never occurred to me that HR wasn't utterly crucial until I went to CIPD, and there's lots of people going, ooh. So yeah.
How do I sell myself?
Exactly.
I think for me as a CEO, it's finding time for the people issues. There are so many other things happening, and we've got a very heavy interface with government departments, and finding the critical time for the people issues is a challenge. And you end up with those conversations at 6 o'clock at night, which aren't particularly healthy for anybody. So being really aware that you've got to create that people time, even though I've spent more than 20 years in that environment, it's just reminding myself of how important that is, and consciously making an effort to engage in that and drive those forward.
And same question to you two, but I'd like to bring in also engaging with other business leaders outside of HR. How do you think their view has changed? Is it better or worse, Simon?
So I suppose from my perspective is, I think is your definition of better or worse. It probably has got a bit better, but I think the expectations have changed as well. And so old school expectations will be tactical support, new school expectations will be more strategic enabling. And I think there is a shift towards the strategic enabling in terms of the expectation, and that's a healthy thing. But some of that shift, the speed of that shift, is very dependent on the ability of the HR individual and or therefore function to match that. And so if the HR function is driving that strategic expectation, it will more likely be fulfilled, which comes back to your point about confidence. If the HR function is worried about being the expert and the tactical execution, then it will always stay in that box. So you've got to, and that's my point actually about walking the way, you've got to rise above that, get out of that ring, start to balance the different tensions, data insight versus just pure data information. And that's a real tension that needs balancing effectively for, I think, good modern HR.
I think it's a chance to step into conversations that traditionally we haven't gone into. So, for example, I'd say very few HRDs spend much time talking to their investors. And actually, the right investors will be asking more and more questions about the calibre of the people in the organisation, the investment that's going into them, the innovation that's happening, their engagement, the unique culture that's being created and curated in the organisation. And that is very different to where we've come from as a profession. But consistently now, culture is being seen as a point of difference when you've got organisations being bought and sold on the basis of, or the stated basis of their culture. I'll give you one example. Spotify, if you haven't seen it, it's a very interesting little video, came out very recently, in which they describe the culture in their organisation. And they talk about it as being a mix of what it is now and what they aspire to. Who is that video talking to? Because it's not just to future employees. It's speaking to their consumers, it's speaking to their investors, their partners. This is a very, very new way of opening up the bonnet and showing what's happening on the inside of an organisation, and a great point of difference.
And I think one of the things that frustrates me a bit about certain HR people in the function in general is it is got a tendency to be very inward looking, and I think that's what you're saying about if you just get bogged down in the details. And I think where it can add value is to engage with multiple stakeholders. So that could be investors, communities, its employees, its customers, it's your counterparts in other organisations. But given we just did a piece of research and we talked about what was holding HR directors back, we got 150 responses from HR directors, and one of the top ones is still not enough time, not enough money, not enough senior buy-in or not interest from the senior management team, and also a lack of HR capability. So how can you deal with all of those issues and find the time and the space to, like you're saying, to look outwards and to engage with other communities and stakeholders?
And sometimes, and one of the things I've missed going into it, what is effectively a startup, is that HR is very good at tidying up all those things that line managers don't do. And actually, we wouldn't bring people on board if it wasn't for a lot of the work that HR does. So sometimes it's very difficult, I think, to get out the mire for all the right reasons. And if you can find a better way of doing that, then fantastic. But I think that challenge is always there. Particularly where organisations won't invest in systems or anything else.
Susannah, how do you think you can step out and find that time and space?
I agree. I think it's very difficult because you get a lot of recognition for solving problems and doing things now that help. It's this helping people stuff. So I ran a team who were, I'm sure many of you have teams like this, they were the sort of back office team, they were the guys that answer the phone, and I discovered that they were doing things like the area managers ringing up asking where the nearest coffee shop was, and they couldn't find a car park, and could somebody help them, and by the way, employee turned up without an employee number and so on. And in the end, because they were so helpful and they loved it, and they were one of my most passionate teams about we really help people, and in the end, because we couldn't get it changed, I dispersed the team. And everybody hated me for about 6 months, but then we actually started doing HR stuff. We were, seriously, area managers, get a grip. You've got a phone, but it makes it easy. And it was the feedback about, oh, but they're lovely and wonderful. So I think it is quite hard when you're actually getting really positive feedback to say, yeah, but you're doing the wrong thing. So I think that's one thing. The other thing I would say is I think, to a certain extent, organisations get the HR teams they deserve, which is if you want people to look after bring them up through large call centres, managing people as commodities, and people have been doing that for 10 or 15 years and doing loads and loads of ER, then you turn around and go, but you're not being strategic. Well, there's sort of a reason for that, which is that that's what you've been doing. So I think it is one of the things that I really like is when organisations bring in junior HR people and move them around a lot. Just because at that point in your career, you can take those risks, you can do 6 months and reward, you may never want to see a spreadsheet again, but you've done it, and you, at 22 or 24 or 26, that's the time to go and find all of those things out. So, and I'm not sure we do that enough, which is bring younger people through with a much broader view of what HR is.
If you were recruiting now for an HR department, what kind of skills and capabilities would you be looking for?
I think it's two or threefold really. One is intellectual flexibility, and it's this bit around being able to go vertically up and down, like pretty quickly, and horizontally very broadly. And that's, I think, quite a unique skill. But I actually think that great HR professionals have that ability. I think a second skill that I'm probably looking for is being able to balance the technical expertise, which is kind of like a given, but with a facilitative mindset. And so, it's understanding what are the core components of what HR is about, but being able to apply questions around that and facilitate conversation and facilitate action in an organisation rather than just inputting the technical piece. So they would be two key skills that I think I would be looking for good HR.
For me, it would be, I completely agree, and I think aligned to that is about curiosity. The curiosity to really get into the business, to ask questions, to find out why do we do things this way, what's the history behind it, is it bearing in mind my start at the end, start with that future piece and then work back in terms of, so what is the way that we're going to need to work to achieve that outcome. So it's that just not accepting the status quo, being very questioning, but starting from a curiosity, because it's amazing what you unpick when you ask great questions. And the second thing would be network. And it's not an age thing. At any age or stage, you can have a fantastic network really quite quickly. We've talked about how that's enabled through social media, etc. But the ability to tap and to network broadly, and to bring in perspectives from different organisations and say, well, these guys are trying this, and I've spoken to my friend, and she's doing this at the moment. And for myself, going back a couple of years, we identified the real shift in the talent that we were going to need within Pentland Brands to deliver our future. And I just went out within my network and said, can I come and have a chat about this challenge in your organisation? Went to 5 completely different organisations. Everyone I contacted said yes. And the ground rules were really clear from the start in terms of, right, this confidential stuff goes over there. But when you're talking about the future, it's not confidential, is it? We haven't done it yet. We don't know. We're exploring. We're being curious. We're alive to it. And it's so much you can learn and co-create with organisations who are completely different to yours, and you realise you're all working it out together. So the power of your network.
Got anything to add on that? And do you think don't want to use the kind of people that we need to drive the function forward, are they choosing to go into HR, or is it kind of about what you're saying about maybe looking in other areas?
I think there are some people who are choosing to go into HR. One of the things that I worry about is the traditional HR structure doesn't help them come in. So many years ago, when I started off in HR, there was one master's course that you could do, which was at FirstGroupk, and that's what everybody did. Now, virtually every business school and some of the best universities in the country do master's courses in HR and HR-related topics. So you've got people who are motivated to go on to do lots of things, but get educated to get a strategic perspective. But I think lots of traditional HR structures are still stuck back in the 1980s, where you come in as a HR officer, if I may use that word, and have to work your way up through doing day release with the CIPD, and that just doesn't work with the sorts of education systems now, and the number of people that do degrees. About 45% of the population now come out with a first degree. When I was young, it was 10%. It's fundamentally changed, and I'm not sure we've changed with it.
It's interesting to think that some organisations, and typically not UK organisations, but some Japanese organisations and other multinational organisations, their career path for people who they see as high potential for the executive table, they must do a stint in HR. It's kind of like you've got to do that, and if you don't do that, you're not making that through that ceiling. And we don't typically have that view in the UK, and it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it, about how in other countries, other other cultures, they have that kind of perspective, and we don't do that. And I wonder at what stage that will change in the UK. I suspect it's not soon, but
although maybe bizarrely, the armed services used to do that. That if you wanted to rise up the ranks, you had to do a stint in the staff piece. I think the only bit I would add is building on Tim's point, is driving through that real strong knowledge of the customer. And I think to pick up your Spotify example, the brand now is all encompassing, and I think in every function you need to understand the end customer, what brings in the money, and building that passion I think is important in HR as it is in marketing or as it is in sales.
I'd like to pick up on this point that you just made, Simon, about, so I spend a lot of time with people leaders and also other business leaders, and if I had like £1 for every time somebody said my people are my greatest asset, I would not be sitting here because I'd be on an island somewhere. So you've got this rhetoric going on all the time, and every time you open a newspaper, there's some scandal or something about, look at what's going on with BHS, look at BP, look at Volkswagen, all these things going on. So we seem to have a mismatch between the rhetoric and then people not respecting HR, and also business leaders perhaps saying they want one thing from HR, they want you to be strategic, but ultimately, if they're having an issue, a disciplinary or a grievance, they want to pick up the phone and you sort it out for them. So how do you walk that line, walk the tightrope, and how can you educate kind of business leaders, I guess, on the value that HR would be capable of adding?
And there's something about the independence that requires. I remember one of my early HR managers saying to me, and I didn't quite get it at the time, she said, at some point, someone's going to ask you to do something that you know is wrong. And you have to have enough money in the bank at that point to walk. And I've never got to that point, but there have been some times when I've had to push back pretty strongly because the approach was the wrong thing to do, ethically the wrong thing to do, the wrong thing for the business, whatever it was, and finding the way to influence back. And that is a particular point of independence. And her point was, she was from a banking background, so her point was actually about financial independence. Of like, you've got to not be beholden to an organisation to the point where you will do everything that you're asked to do. And I think that is something unusual about our profession.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The only other profession that has that similarity is finance, actually, and arguably some of the legal professions as well. So you get these, but then, I see good HR people often liaising with good finance and legal people, right? So they're kind of collaborating and creating that sense of, look, we're a community and we're here to perhaps hold the mirror up to the organisation sometimes and do that fairly effectively and not worry about the impact on our own personal create at that particular moment in time, because actually in the longer term it will have a more beneficial effect because we're actually being honest with ourselves and with the organisation about what's actually happening. So that independence, as you say, and holding the mirror up is actually really quite critical.
And the one point of difference I find between HR and those other professions is the fact that we can be asked to do stuff. It's not illegal. It doesn't fall under a regulatory piece.
Yeah.
But for us, we have to have such clear ethics because our reputation's on the line, and that we are going to carry through our lives. And exactly, it's more subjective.
Yeah.
And how do you think we can? And I think it's interesting what you said at the beginning, John. Now that you're in a CEO role, you're having to make the space and time to think, oh yeah, but what about the people issues? And you come from a HR background. So what about people who don't come from an HR background? How do you help and enable them to find the space and time to think about it so you're not having to fight for every penny of investment?
Well, I think within my own team now, I spend a fair bit of time encouraging people to think about their people issues. So that's an advantage in that perspective. I think it's about, I can't remember if Tim or Simon said, it's about getting out there and talking to people. There is no other way of doing it, and social media won't solve it, and email won't solve it, but getting out and talking to people and showing them where things can be differently. And I think we've all got examples of where great people skills have brought us on or brought others on, and I think if you can use those examples and help people see what they can do, it's hugely powerful in building that engagement.
I think sometimes it's also about finding the key that unlocks that gets you. When I went to Anglia Water, bizarrely it was pensions. I didn't know anything about pensions. I know a lot more now. But actually, it was a really difficult business problem. And we took it on in the HR team, and we were the people, and we ended up organising everybody else, and actually that brought us a huge amount of credibility, which then meant when we came to the table with something else, people were listening more. So sometimes it is just thinking through what is the key thing for my organisation now. Doesn't matter what you read in people management, mindfulness is my latest bugbear. It's like, yeah, really? Sorry. It's a great thing, but seriously, is it going to transform the commercial performance of your business in the next 12 months? Unlikely, I would say. So what is the thing that is to do with people that will transform the commercial performance of your business in the next 12 months, and go and do that really well? Because then you get the credibility that when you come with something else, it's not that you've been on some fluffy course and come back with the next best idea that's out there in fashion world. You've come back, you've thought through what your organisation needs now, and that's what you're doing.
I think that's right, and it's important to do that with data.
Yeah.
So frequently I see people making subjective judgments about that and actually need some data. There's a wide variety typically of people data or people associated data available. Use that to really identify the key issues, understand the root cause of those, prioritise, and then look to have the fix. And I don't always see enough logic to that, but that's super critical to actually do what you're doing effectively, Susannah.
There's something incredibly powerful about being in that boardroom and rather than saying, I believe this, than saying, well, 79% of our people across this market are experiencing this, and we've identified that we're going to need that, that to be 15% in order to deliver the strategy. So can we focus on how we're going to make that difference?
Yeah.
And I think just one of my hobby horses here, but there are lots of things in HR which have become cottage industries. So I'm going to think about engagement. In 2006, or whenever the McLeod report came out, engagement was really interesting and useful and gave you a different way. Now, it's a massive industry with consultants, including probably most of us, crawling all over it, doing all sorts of things. And again, we've lost sight of why are we doing it? Why? Does it matter to your organisation? Is it important? And what are you going to do? Not what clever surveys have you got and what percentages and so on. So I think it's about avoiding the cottage industry of something we all read about and somehow think we should be doing, and actually making it relevant to why am I doing it? Can I justify it? Does it matter to us?
Okay. I'll also build one important thing. It's so easy to talk about what we should do. What's really important is what we're going to stop doing. Yeah. And it's just like, it's just imperative that sometimes just to go, right, how are we spending our time? Why is that? Who actually reads that report? Where does that go to? How does that support anybody in achieving what we actually set out and repeated 50 million times that we actually need to? So I think, putting as much effort into stopping stuff as it is to starting new stuff, A, is incredibly important, and B, stops having a heart attack.
I don't know if anybody else has got any questions. I've always got loads of questions, but you don't need to be scared because there's hardly anyone here. So you won't tell anybody if it's a stupid question. But otherwise, I'll just keep going. If you've got one, just stick your hand up at any point. Yes.
So you said that mindfulness is your thing, which is jump. You said you're obviously not a fan of mindfulness.
No, it's not. I'm not a fan of it. It's become a thing. It's just another thing, and everybody's rushing around going, "Oh, mindfulness! Oh, it's going to solve the problem of the world." Well, it isn't. It may, for your organisation in a particular context, get you somewhere, but it's not a thing. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, kind of. So I suppose
What's your question?
I was just really interested. You obviously work across a breadth of organisations and senior leaders currently, and there's a lot of synergies I see in terms of some of the challenges I think we've all discussed today as HR professionals. I just would be really interested in your thoughts in terms of what's the single most effective people initiative that you're seeing right now add that commercial value?
That's a good question for everyone.
Yeah. So I see lots of people who want to go into organisations and want to come out of organisations, and to a certain extent, understanding what talent is, I think, is a big thing, which is, again, it's become a thing. But understanding how you make everybody in an organisation a bit more productive, a bit more successful. So those sorts of things. And I think that listening is hugely underrated. So I guess maybe I'm just old and cynical, and I've seen so many initiatives and so many change programs all given funky names and rolled out for 2 years, and then it happens again. And I think a lot of it is about understanding for yourself and listening in your organisation about how you can take all these wonderful tools that people have developed and put it together to make something unique for yourself.
I saw two things into my head when you asked that question. One is, what I don't see much of, but I have seen in the past quite powerfully used, is organisational capability analysis, which leads to the second thing that enters my head is, I genuinely think there isn't a one thing that you'll see across organisations making a difference. I always think you've got to take the organisational context, understand what the issues are, and provide a solution, if in fact it is a solution that's needed, tailored right bang for that organisation. And the last thing that I would say on this is, and it comes to the point about listening, I actually genuinely think you know, the best thing that HR can do to add value at a most basic sense, and everyone should think about, is just facilitate good management in the organisation.
Well said.
Anyone got anything to add on this?
I'm going to be a bit more granular. I've got two things on my agenda at the moment. One is around diversity and waking up an industry in rail that is very male, pale and stale, and actually helping them understand that they're missing 50% at least of the talent pool. And you can see the scales falling from the eyes when they suddenly realise that what they've been doing all these years has got them to where they are today, and they need to change. And I think the other thing, on a very, very granular piece, in manufacturing and elsewhere, is helping people understand the challenges of things around, like the apprenticeship levy. And I know that's at the opposite end of the spectrum of what we've discussed, but if you're over a certain turnover, there's a 0.5% of your wage bill coming there. If you can use that effectively to develop your workforce, you can make a huge impact in the capability of your organisation. So apologies for being slightly anal, but that's where I would be.
I'm trying to find an area that I can add to all of those beautiful points. I'd say one thing. Pick up a newspaper and show me the articles that say how wonderful the world of work is. And the examples, the inspiring examples of it's great in this organisation because, and we have an ongoing conversation at the moment about lack of trust, of failure, of reasons that things aren't working across so many organisations. We do need to inspire people, not just future generations that are coming into the workplace, but those of us that are working right now. We do need some belief, and we need some trust in our leaders, and that has to be given, and it has to be given, but it also has to be earned. And if there's one area that we just need to inspire and engage people with at the moment, I think it's about that greater trust in it, that organisations are there to do some good, to create some jobs, to create some prosperity, to create products and services that we need, and to actually have lasting and positive impact for communities. And as a whole, those organisations that are doing those things are not winning the battle of telling those stories, and that is where we need to shift.
We'll cover those stories in HR magazine. Has anybody else got any questions for Nancy?
Hi. My question, I don't know if it's a bit generic, but I'm going to give it a go anyway.
Can I make a request? Would you mind saying who you are and where you're from?
Sorry, I'm Holly from Central Media. I'm interested in all of your experience because you're, as you say, reformed HR people, so you've done the HR piece and now you're sitting mostly on senior leadership teams. And something that I've experienced in my career is the absolute importance of engaging that senior leadership team with what HR are trying to do, specifically learning development, which is what I'm involved in. Any tips on how best to do that? I know that's a really general question, and I know some of it's going to come down to the data bit, but how do you become a trusted advisor in your experience?
That's a really great question.
So I'd go back to listening, because actually what you want to do is solve somebody's problem for them. And I see lots of HR people going in with their solution without having understood the problem. And it is, I think it comes back to some really basic things, which again, it would be great if we were all taught when we were sort of baby HR people about personal interaction. Lots and lots of people don't listen, and most people really like talking about themselves. So if you can listen and get people to talk about themselves, they tend to tell you lots of stuff. One of the things that I've been really, really interested about is I see lots of people going in for interviews and who are candidates and so on, who are obviously all HR people because that's what I do, and the lack of confidence, personal confidence, is quite astonishing. And there is a video by a woman called Amy Cuddy, which is a TED Talk, which is something like the second most watched TED Talk in the world. And she talks about, she's written a book called Presence, and I recommend that to virtually everybody who is going, and the feedback I have had from very senior HR people is it's awesome and amazing, and I'm going, I find it extraordinary that these people who we would all go, wow, you've done so well, and are going, it involves locking yourself in the toilet and power posing, okay, to get yourself feeling confident. And people, these amazing people who are really, really senior are really doing this because it is that thing about I want to feel presence and I want to feel confidence. So some of it, I think, is sort of coming back to having said mindfulness is a thing, coming back to the mindfulness thing about really being confident in yourself, because then people will listen.
Tim and I were doing
Yeah.
power poses in the toilet earlier.
Yeah.
We
I think
It's a great TED talk.
I think you need to use data. It doesn't have to be quantitative data, it can be qualitative data. The feedback you get from people, the successes you've had from moving somebody into a role to, as we talked about, the 6-month secondment or whatever that might be, and engaging people with that, and then finding those advocates who can support you as well, and pushing them hard as advocates.
So the thing that I would add is there's nothing like your own personal experience of what their experience is. So you've absolutely got to be able to get out there and be able to talk about stories that they will relate to.
Yeah.
You've seen, you've heard, you've experienced, you've done exactly what they've done. And then I think from that you get the listening piece and you get the data. But if you've got the listening, so you understand where they're coming from, you've got the data, which is kind of your evidence, but then you make the connection through the stories that you personally create from their experiences. I think that is what gives you a kind of a good formula as a basis. You may well add a form.
No, I'm going to tell a story instead.
Excellent.
Because just to build on that, I for 5 years lived in Sydney, selling booze across Australia and NZ and Pacific Rim. And my favourite data example is this. It's perhaps not the most acceptable by contemporary norms, but okay, but just stick with me. Okay. Central Sydney CBD, there is a motorway that goes, well, obviously it goes to the west. If it went to the east, you get quite wet, wouldn't it? So it goes and it goes through all the western suburbs. And massive drink in Oz is ready to drink. So like particularly rum and coke, various brands. And the way that the guys used to look at the who was buying which one was called the splatter pattern. Now, was this by phoning up and speaking to people? Was it surveys in the street? No. It was as you turned off the motorway, you finished your tinny and the tin and chucked it out the window. So they would go and look at the litter collection at the exits from the motorway to see who drank what in each suburb. The point of the story is you don't need to spend a lot of money to get really powerful data. But it's finding the way of getting that insight to then win the argument.
We in no way condone drinking and driving.
Exactly. He didn't say it was a driver. He did not say it was a driver.
Has anybody just covering our backs? Anybody else got any questions or this guy over there?
Hi, Steve Wyatt from Capgemini. So given the breadth of experience of the panellists, should we read anything into the fact that you've all moved out of HR?
Great question.
So like I said, I mean, I think, some organisations, some cultures encourage a spell of experience in HR. I equally think vice versa is true. So if HR is your chosen career over perhaps a lifetime, 2, 3, 4 decades, whatever, then actually spending some time out of HR has probably got to be good as well.
I see it as part of a pattern. As I've said right at the start, once time I was an actor, I was a store manager, worked in HR for a long time, now run my own business. And it's still having those conversations, but if I go back into being an HRD in the future, who's going to say to me, the fact that you've done a coaching qualification and run your own business and really understand how to make sure that you're afloat month to month to month, no one's going to say, that was a silly move, wasn't it?
I think it's so. I still think, because I deal with HR people and I'm doing HR things, but I was really surprised when I took on. So when I went to CRPD, I was deputy chief executive, so I ran marketing and research and things like that. I wasn't running anything to do with HR. And the surprise of people who went, you're an HR person. And I'm going, no, I'm a business person. And I actually think, you wouldn't say, would we be asking, so finance people who become chief executives, that's perfectly reasonable. And what I think is it's what we need to change is I think HR people should be running businesses. I think they should be chief executives. What I'm more surprised about is more people don't want to. And I wrote an article about becoming non-execs, and quite a lot of the comments underneath were like, but I really like being in HR. So I think there's a chicken and egg thing there. And, you know, as people get older and more senior and gather more experiences, they tend to take on big general management roles, and I think the more the better, because then we'll have senior people and chief executives who really get the people stuff. So I think it's really good.
I'm in a startup role. If I come out of this and go back into HR, I'd be delighted. It's a fascinating place to work. I came out of brands marketing to do it. It's a great career.
Any other questions? I shall start. I've got a couple more short ones, but I'll keep them quick. I'll let everyone get to the pub or train or wherever. I have to go to the Great Places to Work masquerade ball thing. If anyone's going, oh no, I'll tell you about it later. If anyone's going to that.
What are you going as?
This
Spotify.
annoying journalist. It's a really easy costume. Looking forward, say, I don't want to go too far in the future, but just like 10 years in advance, what would you like an HR function to look like? Because we hear a lot of things about, some people suggest it should split, some people suggest that, you know, we need to just rename things, that will solve all of our problems. Just need to pick out a couple of changes that you would like to see to the function and the people leading and working in the function. What would those be? I'll start with you, John.
I don't think it matters as long as it serves what that particular business needs and wants, to make sure that its people are engaged with the end customer, and it's profitable and it's growing and it's doing all the things that they want it to do. Don't matter what it's called.
I agree, and I think it comes back to this gentleman's question. I think what I'd like to see is more HR people as non-executive directors on boards and leading business functions, that it's actually seen as truly a business function, and we're not quite so worried about it being HR.
I can see things coalescing, so I can see conversations about people, being they consumers or employees, kind of just becoming conversations about people. So insights which are broken up across consumer insights and employee insights, and all these insight teams actually just becoming actually with the insights team. So I think, you know, less about our traditional silos and more about the real deep capability of looking after a topic. Makes sense?
So if I come back to my starting metaphor, then I'd say, you know, assuming for a second, you know, that life can be a bit like a circus, then there's kind of this bit about walking that line and being a shining light in that circus, and the balancing that involves. And I think that's key for me, and it probably leads to you know, three things actually. It leads to a degree of independence. So I do think it is and should be and continue to be a strongly independent function. I think there's also something about integrated. So it has to be integrated within itself, and it has to integrate well with other functions, and that needs work. And the last thing, it has to be integral to the business. So 3 I's, right? And integral to the business is about being absolutely part of it and not on the sidelines. So that would be what I'd say for the future.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much, and thank you everybody who
Yay, thank
stuck
you.
around. Well done you.
Yeah.
I'll finish it there. Thank you.